There's one sculpture which I'm quite fond of. It's The Thinker by Meera Mukherjee. When you think of a thinker, you don't think of this thinker, but the moment you see this thinker, you know it's an Indian thinker. I would concede that I think I have a good eye. I know what I like when I see it. I'm not sure for me the motivation is how well known an artist is. It's always how good the art is.
Yeah.
BNG could make you fall in love with something that he would speak about just because of how beautifully he spoke about it. I blame him for this disease that he's given me, and I'm very grateful that he took me back to look at traditional Indian paintings.
Abhishek Poddar is one of those handful of Indians who not only built a substantial, variegated art collection of his own, but also made a part of the collection and other artworks accessible to the people. His interest in art started in childhood as he grew up in a house full of Raj era and modern paintings. As a student in Doon School, he published the school's first art magazine. Then, after years of planning and bringing together leaders in government and industry, he set up the spectacular Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore, which is now at the heart of the city's cultural circuit. We are joined by him on the Expression podcast to talk about his passion in art, the imperative in front of cultural institutions, and the direction in which Indian philosophy is headed. Hi Abhishek, nice
Hi
to have you
Neha,
here. Thank you for coming.
thanks for having me.
So you grew up in a cultural milieu in Kolkata, and your parents were connoisseurs and collectors. But your idea about art and collection of art is very different and very differs from theirs. So how would you characterize this evolution?
I think I was fortunate to have that exposure while growing up, but my interest became a lot more as to what was happening currently in the country. And it was a series of meetings with artists and contemporary artists of the time. And while I was still at school, that shaped my likes and dislikes as far as art is concerned. I think since you are also from Cal, you would know that, I mean, maybe not when I was growing up because you're a lot younger, but at that time it was more the hangover of what the English had left behind. The contemporary art scene in India was very, very nascent, and not many people were looking at it seriously or collecting it. Nor, funnily, was Calcutta the place that miniatures and stuff were being looked at. There were few collectors of that in terms of the Goenkas and the Neotias, but it wasn't commonplace way back then. So I think it was in the mix of all that that I grew up, and that's why I've been shaped by many different influences.
Yeah. And how have artists like M.F. Hussain, F.N. Souza, and Guy Tonde, and even Manjeet Bawa, how have they influenced your understanding for art?
So I'm not sure all of them have played a role, but of the four names that you mentioned, both Hussein and Manjeet have had a huge impact on my life. Hussein was possibly the first big Indian artist I met, and that was also by chance. And he and me became really good friends, and he used to come and stay with me in Calcutta. And I was all of 15. We've even painted on the same canvas. We've met in various places. He's introduced me to lots of artists. So, when you end up meeting the best and learning from the best, it's something, and especially Hussein would have been what? I would imagine 50, 55 years older than me, maybe 60 years older than me. So there was this huge age gap between us. And, when one is 15 and somebody is in his 60s or 70s,
But still, you
I
connected.
mean, he was older than my grandfather,
Yeah.
but we really connected. He would spend time indulging me. That's all I can say. But of course, he had a huge impact. Manjeet came into my life a few years later, and with him, it was a closer, warmer relationship because he really shaped my understanding of art a lot more. And I spent a lot more time with Manjeet than I did with Hussein. Um, we also painted together, but my painting is not what I'm proud of. But we we even worked together. We did a bunch of projects together, and with Manjeet we traveled together, and that was a relationship till the very end. I mean, right from coming and dancing at my wedding to being there every step of my life, he's been there.
See, there was a personal bond too
Oh
between
yeah,
both of
yeah.
you.
With both of them, it was personal.
And tell us something about your interaction with Henry Cartier-Bresson and Martin, Frank, and other global artists that you've interacted with.
So, in fact, I actually met Cartier-Bresson even before I met Hussein. It was by chance. He was visiting Calcutta and he had come over home, and he, I think he had a Calcutta connection because um, he had a, if I'm not mistaken, he had a Bengali wife before Martin.
Yeah.
And it was Krishna Ribu who brought him. And Krishna was originally from Calcutta, married into the Ribu family. And Mark Ribu, this was Mark Ribu's sister in law, Krishna. Krishna was his great aesthete and collector of Indian miniatures, jewelry, textiles. A lot of her collection is now at the Guimet. So she had brought Bresson along, and that's when I first met him. And I think I've only met him twice, but I've met Martine many times. We, in fact, even represented her at Tasir, the photography gallery that I did. And it was then with, I think this was 1980, 81. I can't remember. No, it may have been before. It may have been late 70s when Bresson had come down. And he took a bunch of pictures at home, and I have a picture that he had taken of the family then. And Martine I knew almost till her end, but I guess I was too young. I was 10 or 11 when I first met Bresson.
See, so that picture must be gorgeous now, right?
Well, it's interesting because it's personalized.
Yeah.
And funnily, of course, he hadn't come to meet me because they had come to see Dad. And it was, I think Bresson was staying at my uncle's place, which is my mom's sister's husband. So they had come down to meet us, and of course they were with Dad. But of all the pictures that Bresson took, there was a picture which he liked. He writes a letter to me, and I still have that little postcard, which said, "Of all the pictures I took, this is the one I like the most." And we were four people in that picture: my grandfather, two of my cousins, and me. In fact, Shraddha is in that picture. And he sends four different copies of different sizes of the same picture with a different message behind each one. But there were no instructions that I should give one to each one, so I just kept them all.
Right. How? What about your interaction with other collectors like Suresh Nevatia, B.K. Birla? Any learnings?
Suresh Tauji a lot, and in fact, when Bresson had come, he was in his house because his younger brother is married to my mom's sister, Mr. Vinod Nevatia. And he had this incredible eye and hunger for learning about Indian art, and every Sunday breakfast growing up used to be in Queen's Park at their place. And there would be someone from, either it would be Gopi Kishan Kanoria or it would be a historian who is from a US university, or it is from someone from Bharat Kala Bhavan, or it would be an artist. And as an 8-year-old or 7-year-old, all these things didn't make much sense, but we had to be sitting there and hearing them. And God knows, somewhere subconsciously, vicariously, some stuff would have been assimilated without knowing. And he had this amazing library which had the most interesting books on Indian art. And there was this one particular book he had in his library, which he would allow me into his library. I could borrow anything from there, but there was one book which I could not take away from there. And of course, that's the book you want. And it was, I still remember, it was called India of Rajas. It was partly a catalogue of a show that Diana Vreeland had done at the Met, I think in 1970 or 71. It was on textiles, and it also had these incredible paintings by Sevakram, Patna, Murshidabad artist in the days of the Raj. The most beautifully illustrated book. And it was a Franco Maria Ricci publication. And I discovered that book in, I think it was in 10 Corso Como in Milan. And there were like 4 copies available of that. I said, I'm buying them all because the last time I saw it, I wasn't allowed to even move it from where it was.
That's very
And he
interesting.
gave me this incredible book. I think it would have been sometime in the early 80s, which became the first major book on Indian art that I possessed and I looked through. And so that kind of became a Bible.
Nice, because I read that you grew up in a household which had Raj landscapes, right? Raj times landscape.
So I don't think they were paintings that were collected during the Raj,
Yeah.
but they weren't what the Raj produced.
Okay.
These were English artists which were possibly made outside the country but brought in by, you know, half the Bengalis were
Yeah.
all more influenced by the English than they
Yeah.
were by India. So it's the kind of art they collected. Yeah.
And what was your first memory of artists like Anjali Menon, Jatin Das, Yamini Roy? Because I remember that I read that these were the first works you bought when you were given.
So it was a painting I'd seen of Anjali Menon at somebody's home, and I wrote to Anjali. I must have been 30
from Doon.
from Doon, and before she wrote back, somebody came and told me one day in school that your name is in the papers. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? And he said, yeah, I just read your name in the papers. It was an interview with Anjali Menon where she had quoted a paragraph from the letter that I had written, and she wrote something like, this is a letter from this young schoolboy which brought me much warmth, and she repeated what I had written there, which is what made me write back to her again. And then she, in fact, asked me to go and visit this gallery in Calcutta in my holidays, which Victor Banerjee used to run on Ho Chi Minh Sarani is what it used to be called in those days. I think they've
Still
changed the
there.
name now.
No,
Okay.
still there.
And there was a painting of hers there, which was, I would say, my first major buy. And it was in that gallery that I saw a work by Jatin Das, which was the first work I had bought with the money that I had made or I had saved. It was all of, I think, 1100 rupees. But yeah, that was the first work. So Anjali's would have come second, but I didn't have the courage to buy the Anjali, which was a lot more expensive at that time. So I needed help for that.
Nice. Also, talk to us about your first exhibition called The Subjective Eye at Mumbai. I like the name, it's very interesting.
So this was a show that there used to be this gallery called Sakshi, which was in Bangalore at those days.
Okay.
And they were going to be opening a branch in Bombay. And Geeta Mehra, who runs the gallery, I had known her because of the gallery in Bangalore. And this would have been, I think, 92 or thereabouts, early 92, I would imagine, or sometime then. That it was a few months before that, or I may be off with my dates a little bit. So she'd asked me to curate a show as the opening show of Sakshi Gallery. And we selected artists who I had a personal relationship with. I don't see myself as a curator at all, but I said I don't have the ability or what's needed to curate a show, but I can talk about my relationship with these artists and why they mean to me. So that's how we went about it. I think there was Jayashree Chakravarti, Arpita, um, Jogain. I'm not even sure I remember who was the fourth. We'll come back. I think there was Manjeet in there as well. 4 or 5 artists, yeah.
A lot of Bengal influences, though. Most artists that you've picked up.
No, of these it was, yeah, Jogain was from there and so was Jayashree.
Yeah.
You're right.
So, Professor B Goswami, he had a huge impact in your life.
Yep.
Would you like to tell us how, and if you remember any fond memories?
So many.
Yeah. with
So
him?
BNG was, he could make you fall in love with something that he would speak about just because of how beautifully he spoke about it and how lovely he made it. And I think this is a skill that very, very few people have.
Was
Not
it
only
poetic?
he would use poetry, he would quote um, shlokas and dohas in the middle, he would connect anecdotes, and his knowledge was so deep that it came across with such conviction, and he could explain it to you from the level that you were at. I've seen him interact with absolute novices to other pundits, and everybody would be eating out of his palm. So I'd attended a workshop that he had done on miniature paintings. It was in Bangalore, must have been 20 something years ago. It was a 3 day workshop. It was pretty immersive, and it was a full day thing where he was talking about different schools. And I wasn't sure I would be able to last, but as a subject, I don't think I could have lasted. But because of BNG, I lasted. And not just lasted, I was hooked. So I blame him for this disease that he's given me. And I'm very grateful that he took me back to look at traditional Indian paintings, which I had initially started looking at, but because I didn't know anything about it, I moved to contemporary and people like Manjeet and Hussain and others. Because here you can have a conversation with the artist, you can ask them if you don't understand. The whole question of fakes and stuff in the contemporary market wasn't there because at that time one was speaking to the artist directly. Whereas something which was done 300 years ago, you don't know who's done it, you don't know what rag they are talking about or which episode from the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or whose portrait, which king it is from Kishangarh or Nurpur or Murshidabad or Awadh, or which school in the Punjab Hills or which state in Rajasthan, and whether it was fake or not. So it was too complicated. So I didn't get into it until BNG got me there. He also, in fact, sat on MAP's advisory board until he passed away, and he did a bunch of talks for us. He also recorded about 28, 29 small episodes where he would take one particular painting and talk about it.
And what was the theme or subject that he was most passionate about?
I think he was very versatile. His specialization was, of course, traditional Indian painting from up till, I would say, 19th century. But I mean, he would have done at least 20, 25 books. So the great artists like Manku and Nansuk, to Sikh paintings, to Pichwais. So, I mean, he knew it all. But at the same time, he's even written about, he used to write this weekly column for the Tribune in Chandigarh, where he could be writing about a clay figurine that he's found either in a museum which he's not been to before, it's got nothing to do with India, or it could be a photograph by Bone and Shepherd that he's seen somewhere, to even a picture by Salgado or to a poster somewhere. So it was not limited to only traditional Indian art.
works of Atul Lodhia, Dhruva Mistry, Jayashree Chakravarti before they became famous. How do you know when a work of art is good? And what are the signs we should look for?
I'm not sure. I mean, Atul, yes, I had bought a work from his first exhibition. And Dhruv, I think, was already well known, but he was not so well known here. He was well known in the UK, which is where he had spent most of his time. Uh, I'm not sure. For me, the motivation is how well known an artist is. It's always how good the art is,
Yeah.
and there are enough well known artists whose works may not excite me, and enough unknown artists whose works might excite someone. It's all got to do with your taste.
No, but
Now,
you have this knack of spotting talent, right? So my question is,
you only know the ones that have been successful. How do you know the others?
just
Well,
right.
I would concede that I think I have a good eye,
Yeah.
and I know what I like when I see it. But it's not with the idea of, oh, this is going to become a famous artist.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if the artist becomes famous or not,
Yeah.
as long as the work is good.
So what should we look for in a piece of art? Like,
I think I can tell you what I look for, and then it's up to you to see what you would like to see. I look for how someone is communicating something in their own language, and it's a language which is their own. And how effective are they in the way they say what they are saying? And it's difficult to just find one work. You've got to look at the trajectory or a body of work of the artist to realize where they are coming from. And is this a one off or is this a series? It's like you'll never judge a restaurant with one dish that you've eaten. Or if you were to look at a chef, you would look at a series of things that they've done. One thing may be a fluke, but if 10 things are a fluke, then you've selected somebody who's really good at what they do.
yeah. So you've been an avid art collector since the 1980s. How has your perspective of art evolved and changed over the years?
I don't think I have a perspective on art, and I'm not sure how it would change. It's just that it's a little, what should I say? I used to be much more excited in the 1980s looking at art than I am now, because it takes a lot more to get me excited now. So I feel sometimes it's good to know less, because otherwise you become critical and cynical, which I don't enjoy. But it's like whenever you know a subject well, you'll know when it's no good immediately. But before you know it's no good, you're even willing to spend time with that. So I think that's the only thing that's changed.
Okay. From mining explosive to collecting art, so how do you balance these vastly different worlds and do they ever intersect?
Well, I think one makes the other possible. And whatever you're doing at that time, you immerse yourself in that. I think they are both so different from each other. It's like what you do for a day job and what you do for a passion. They could be related, they may not be related, but yet how they both coexist in the same person. It's not that one has to take over completely for the other one to find expression. Currently, I see myself spending a lot more time with the museum and with art than I spend in the businesses, and that's also because the businesses are professionally run and well run, and I can't make such a difference over there, and I enjoy this more. So,
What's one day of Abhishek Poddar like?
so I think it's on what is dealt to me that day. There could be a day where I'm doing only work and very little stuff to do with the museum or with art, whereas another day could be a day where it's the reverse. So it really depends on what day it is and what has been dealt to me that day and what are the issues that you need to sort out.
Yeah.
I would believe that whatever is needed, and then depending on the priority that something has come with, I would rarely change an appointment that I have unless there is something that I just cannot avoid. So whether that is a business meeting or it is, something to do with the museum, I would not change that. And the rest of the day would be whatever requires my time.
Nice. What have been the biggest lessons from managing such a legacy business?
So this is something that I was not involved in because I think it was either bought the year I was born or around that time. So this is a question for my father or my grandfather.
But you're taking the legacy form.
Yeah, so this was a managing agency, and it was after the English had gone that they still continued some managing agencies here. So the family acquired this business, and along with that came these tea plantations. And then we slowly bought the companies that MB was managing. Uh, it's got an interesting and an old history because, in fact, it would trace its connection even down to Hong Kong when England got it as a colony from China, and it has its history, even its connection to the East India Company. So there was Jardine Matheson in Hong Kong, and there was Jardine Henderson in Calcutta, and there was a Bosanke and Scrine in Sri Lanka. And I would imagine that these were English companies which were involved in the trading of tea and the silver that would come and the indigo and the possibly even the opium trade, at least as far as Jardine Henderson and Jardine Matheson were concerned. Matheson, Bosanke and Scrine were more for the tea trading. And that's the connection between these. And this was actually told to me more by an English historian who I had met at the time of the change of the calendar during the millennial, where he told me the story of Matheson Bosanke, and I happened to bump into him in Cochin, where he had come to do some research, and he said, "Well, I've been studying your company, and this is what it is, but I haven't done this history, and it's not something that has been in the family for hundreds of years that we had this legacy." And yes, I think it was established as a company possibly around the early 1900s. So it's been over 100 years, or 1920s maybe.
How do you ensure sustainability and innovation in traditional industry like tea production?
Tea is a business which very little has changed in the last 100 years. The joke is that the Scotsmen who built some of these factories, if they were to come back today, they would still be able to operate the factories because so little has changed. So, I mean, I'm saying it quite literally, but of course things have moved, but it's not kept pace with the way the rest of the world has changed. There are just certain industries where it's the same system of manufacturing or whatever. I think a lot more innovation is needed over there. It's still hugely labor intensive, and anything that is very labor intensive in this day and age is not going to be as sustainable. So, sustainability in that sense, of course, what you do for the environment and ecology, but it also has to be sustainable as a business. In terms of explosives, it kind of goes right at the opposite of sustainability because unfortunately you are uncovering a mine or exposing a mineral which was under the earth, which is what mining does. What mining companies would do is they have to look at environmental concerns, and after a mine is already mined, then how do you rehabilitate that and grow stuff again on there? I think laws in India are becoming a lot stricter about that. I would imagine almost 90 plus percent of the explosives we manufacture is all exported, and almost very little, if any of it, is sold in the country.
Okay.
So, take for example, in some of the more developed parts of the world, once you exhausted a mine, you've got to make sure how you turn that into a natural park
Yeah.
after that. So until then, the same company is held responsible for it.
You gifted your parents with something unique, a flower painted by various artists. How did you think of that? And do you have any more interesting gifting ideas that you've come across?
So this was their silver wedding anniversary. It was in the late 80s. Uh, it's a difficult choice to give a meaningful gift to somebody who
Yeah.
has everything,
Yeah.
or at least from what you know in that limited, because when it's been 25 years of your parents' wedding, you are about 20, if at all. Uh, so after grappling with many ideas, and when I couldn't think of something that, of course, you can give anyone anything, but
Yeah.
it, how do you make it significant and
Yeah.
meaningful
I know what
and
you're
something
saying.
that they're going to cherish? When I finally got fed up of thinking, another painting, another piece of art, a piece of jewelry was pretty meaningless, I said, why don't we just give them flowers? But flowers that would never wilt. And how do you give them flowers that would never wilt? And I said, okay, it becomes a nice grid, 5 by 5. Let's get 25 artists to paint a flower each, one for each year of their marriage.
Nice.
An idea like that, you can keep thinking about it and it won't pop into your head. And when it has to, it would pop
Yeah.
out of nowhere. So I don't know where to go to get these ideas, but it just came. And
Anything recently? Any other?
no, so I did give my parents again something else. It was dad's 50th birthday when I gifted him 9 paintings, again done by 9 women artists. It was on the Navdurga in the 9 colors of the Navratan. So it was Shakti painting Shakti, but in a particular color as the Navdurga. And it's got an interesting story because I knew the list of the 9 artists that I wanted, but one of the artists said no,
Okay.
because she said this is very restrictive, where you're giving me the subject, you're giving me also the color and the size.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I can't do it. And without all 9,
Yeah.
that entire thing would
Would
not
be
happen.
yeah.
And I was really stuck because I didn't find, of course, I could have found any other artist, but I wanted people of a certain category or caliber.
Did
So
you convince?
I was complaining about it to Manjeet, and he said, "You know what? Why don't I do the 9th one?" And I said, "Damn it! But I need a woman to be doing this because they're all done by women artists." And he said, "There's a male and a female inside every person.
Yeah.
So let me get the woman inside me to do this." And he signs it as Manjeet Kaur.
Your wife Radhika Sangi, she's a designer and entrepreneur. And how do you inspire each other creatively and professionally?
I wouldn't say Radhika is a designer. Radhika is interested in design. She runs a design store, but I
Yes.
don't think she's a designer herself. And I think we go back a long, long time. It's going to be, next year is going to be 50 years since we know each other.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Not that we've been married 50 years, but that's when we met first. She has an incredible eye and an incredible eye for detail. And I think we complement each other because we bring different skills to the table. She is very organized, and I'm totally disorganized. She's very meticulous, and I'm all over the place. But at least aesthetically, we agree. So that's a good
Yeah.
combination. Otherwise, that would be disaster.
I know.
If our tastes were different, God, I wonder who would win.
I know, and you have your home walls. I don't know who'll be the winner. At least there you're
It
in the same
depends who you
page.
ask this question.
Yeah,
There'll be different winners.
absolutely. But is there any way that you'll have disagreements at work or
So we don't work together.
Yeah,
She runs her business. I mean, she has a store called Cinnamon.
it's beautiful.
Thank you. And she does all the merchandise for MAP and all the organization at MAP. At some level, she's behind that. We used to have more disagreements earlier than now, but now, touch wood, it's barely. Yeah, we tend to agree on all the major stuff, and then the 10% doesn't matter who wins. You just give in. Yeah.
That's going to be another conversation. I'm going to ask you more secrets on that. So, how do you keep abreast of the art world? Are there any particular social media handles that you follow? Any art magazines, something that you subscribe to? Do you stay or do you stay in touch with other museum curators?
I think all of the above, but not actively in terms of following a particular handle. Um, one has accidentally come across artists that one didn't know about because of Instagram or social
Yeah.
media. I mean, one such would be um, I discovered the work of this young guy in Prague called Petra Vacek, I think, which was quite interesting. I even learned about someone like Paul Coxedge on social media. So, but it's not because there was a particular account that I was
Yeah.
following which gave me that insight. Uh, One travels extensively
Yeah.
and goes to exhibitions. I'm at the Venice Biennale every edition. I'm at Kochi every time. I'm at the Delhi Art Fair. Um, on There are certain museums and galleries that one sees, the Tate or the V&A in
Yeah.
London or the Royal Academy would be at least once a year. There would be the Met or the Morgan or the Whitney or the Frick. Frick, of course, is not always showing contemporary or modern stuff. I think since COVID and since Black Lives Matter, everybody is looking at that
Yeah.
aspect.
Yeah.
So it's not that one is only looking at modern and contemporary stuff. One is looking at traditional arts, one is looking at antiquities, one is looking at design, architecture, all of the above. Magazines. I'm not sure. No, there aren't too many art magazines that I look at. Um,
Of your
it's
travels, any spectacular exhibit that you've been to so far and
ah,
it's unforgettable?
I think something that really I enjoyed recently was the Michael Craig Martin show at the Royal Academy, which was just brilliant. I've known Martin's work for a long time, but he had this one immersive one, which was particularly special. Last year, in fact, at the same venue was the great exhibition that they had done on Marina Abramovich. And it was the first time in so many hundred years that there was a solo woman artist, which the RA showed, which was lovely. There was a tiny jewel of a little exhibition at the Met this fall, which was a collection of I think merchant ivory, again brilliant on miniature paintings. So every now and then there's a little surprise when
Yeah.
you're not expecting it. Of course, I think one of the most seminal shows that I saw as a kid, I remember there were two or three. One was Mapu had done a textile exhibition called Vishwakarma. It was, again, mid 80s. I'd seen it when in Calcutta, the Birla Academy of Art and Culture. Just staggering exhibition, which is what got me excited in textiles. Um, then what B Goswami had curated a show at the Rietberg. It was called, I think, Masters of Indian Painting. Stunning show. So that trip, I had to choose between going to the Venice Biennale or going to the Rietberg, and I'm glad I went to the Rietberg. So those kind of shows are kind of edged. Uh, a show which was brilliant, which was again in Calcutta, called Visions. It was a show on four artists. There was Jogen, Ganesh Pine, Somnath Hor, and Vikash Bhattacharya. Again, sometime in the 80s. Staggering show. And it was really great shows like this that you see once in a blue moon, which you see much more often abroad, but in India it was few and far between, which was one of the reasons why I was wondering why great shows like that are not happening here, and why aren't Indian museums doing it? Which was one reason even to get into making sure that we can have great shows happening here.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite piece that stands out in your personal collection? And is there a story behind it that resonates deeply with you? Are there any limited edition or custom made or something?
There are many such.
Yeah.
I don't know which one to single out. There's one sculpture which I'm quite fond of. Um, it's not very large, it may be about that big. It's The Thinker by Meera Mukherjee. And it's, it's a very Indian thinker. Now, when you think of the thinker, you think of Rodin's thinker who's seated like that, which the whole world has seen. And this is a thinker which, when you think of a thinker, you don't think of this thinker. But the moment you see this thinker, you know it's an Indian thinker.
Okay.
And
How? What?
because of the position that he's seated in, and uh, it was, I think, the first work of Mira's that I purchased, and it would have been again 87 or 86, something like that. Brilliant, brilliant work. And maybe I'm just a little, I have a softer spot for it because of that became the beginning of my relationship with Meera Mukherjee also. And it was possibly the first sculpture that entered the collection. Uh, it would not be the most valuable work in the collection, or it wouldn't be the strongest work necessarily, or the largest work in the collection, but just picking up something which personally resonated with me.
Lovely. You've been in the advisory committee of the National Gallery of Modern Art, among other spaces. So, what has been your experience?
Interesting. You know, there's a lot to learn from any committee or board that you are sitting on because one, you learn about that institution, and two, you learn from the others who are on the board or on the committee. Uh, but when it comes to contributing to a committee, it becomes a lot more of a challenge because there are different aspects which come into play over there. And different people have different agendas who are on the committee. So until you're well aware of what those are, navigating through that becomes an issue. But I think I've sat on the NGMA committee both in Delhi as well as in Bangalore. So there's been a fair amount of learning. There are times where it's incredibly frustrating, and you say, why the hell are you here wasting your time? But there's also a lot of learning. I just feel also that government committees function very differently from the way corporate committees function. And very often, part of these committees are there for the sake of being a committee, and part of these committees are to get work done. Whereas this is never the way businesses would do it. So it's also navigating that. And unless you know the system and you don't have too much patience, it can be trying.
But what has been your learning there? When you say that lot of learning, maybe one.
So I think learning is, it also comes a little bit more with maturity that it teaches you patience. And what you realize is only you think the way you do. And everybody else thinks their own way. And there's no right or wrong in the way people think. This is your way of thinking, this is my way of thinking, this is his way of thinking, that is her way of thinking. And every way of thinking may be different from mine, might also have a solution, which may be a solution you agree with or you don't agree with. So I think that's a huge learning. Whether I would do it that way may not be the case.
So, would you like to tell us something about your collaborations or partnerships with museum in other parts of the world?
So I think at MAP we have, not having come from a museum background and not having even come from having studied art and not been to art school or even done art history, it was more an interest in the arts that got me excited rather than a degree in the arts. how do you do a museum that is meaningful to people? I said, let's learn from the best. So let's learn from different museums what works and what doesn't work. And in the process of doing a collaboration with them, there would be so much more learning. And so we looked at 3, 4 different projects that we could do. And, you know, because we were birthed during COVID, there was very little chance of interaction except online and over Zoom and over the phone. So we also had to look at those collaborations which could happen during COVID, and we didn't know what the end date for that was going to be. So I think one of the projects that we embarked on was this thing called Museums Without Borders, which could be done with various museums because it was talking about one object there and one object in our collection and how to link that together with a common story. And that's been fascinating because what happens is when you're trying to make these connections, you learn not only about what they are talking about, but you learn so much about what you had paired from your own side. And in the process, because if you're doing the same project with 10 different people, again, everybody approaches it differently, but the objective is the same, that this is what we need to achieve. So today, the assimilated knowledge and how to do it better, faster, quicker, more efficiently is something that has come out of these experiences. Similarly, we did something called the director's cut, where we had a director over there in conversation at MAP and exchanging ideas about how museum making happens, or working with external curators and working on exhibitions together. So I think this is a journey that will never stop. And we also are fortunate that many of them even have people from our team coming there to learn from them. We have many of them visiting us and talking to us and teaching us stuff. So I think it'll be a lifetime of learning from different museums, and we can only aspire to get to where they are.
MAP is very, very close to international standards, I would say, and all the digitization that you've done. And the part I also saw where you could go send greetings and things like that, which was
So I think in some of those things and in tech, we may be ahead of many museums. Yeah.
So, what has your experience been with Tasveer, and what are your plans for it? And have you got associations with institutes like NID to encourage emerging artists?
So Tasveer is something we started many years ago, and we've closed it down actually. We closed it down when we started work on the museum because it was a gallery for photography, which when we started, it was Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, and Calcutta.
Even Ahmedabad.
It was, I think, within 6, 8 months that we included Ahmedabad. And it was, I was actually invited to be on the jury of some project which I was to look at NID. And that's when I inquired about their photography department. And unfortunately, they didn't have a full-fledged photography department, which they did have earlier. And I said, why? And they said there weren't too many takers for it. And I said, how can the premier institute of design in the country not have a photography department? So I left them with a challenge, and I had said that if you did a full-fledged photography department, Tasveer would send every photography exhibition to NID, just that your students and those who are doing the course can look at great photography without just having to look at books or on a website. And every show of ours went there after that. So I got a call from their dean saying that, Abhishek, thank you for saying that, and we are starting this. Will you keep your part of the promise? And I just made one little request to them. I said, I will send it, and I'll send it at our cost. But you have to keep the show open to the people of Ahmedabad and not just for NID, so that the city at least can enjoy it. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, how did you fall in love with photography, and did you do any course? No?
I'm very bad at anything to do with art in terms of painting or photography. So I think it was this chance meeting with Cartier-Bresson and stuff like that. And um, I was kind of getting a little bored of
Art.
looking at the kind of paintings, this would have been in the mid 90s. It became kind of a formula. Everybody was churning out stuff. The Indian art market had just begun to kind of wake up, and there were artists being talked about, and they started producing art for the market rather than for themselves. And when you start producing
Commercially.
it kind of loses something. And till then, artists were barely being able to sell anything, so they were producing work for their own pleasure. They weren't doing it because iska char bana do, iska chhe bana do, the way uh, people go about making stuff. And that's what got me a little disillusioned with art. And it was around the same time that I happened to see um, a film of three women photographers. It was an IFA dinner where they were talking about Dayanita Singh, Ketki Seth, and Homai Vyarawala. And I was just gobsmacked by what I saw, and especially Dayanita's work. Uh, this would have been mid 90s, maybe 95, 96, I can't remember exactly when. And I hadn't seen her work before. So I actually sought her out and went to meet with her, may have been a year or two later. And when I saw what she was doing, it was like being a kid again and looking at a work of it was a medium I'd not spent much time with at all. And I would really credit her for opening my eyes to photography. And she introduced me very soon to Prabuddha. And he then also introduced me to other photographers. So it became a new stream to follow, and that carried me along.
So, what are the different genres of photography, and is there anything that interests you a lot, like travel or
So I
fashion?
can't say that I have a particular genre in that. I like it's like what subject in a painting do I enjoy? It's the painting that I enjoy. It could be a subject I have never seen before, which, I mean, it could be abstract, it could be figurative, it could be landscape, it could be, you know, there could be a story in it, there could be a narrative work. Similarly, in a photograph, it could be. I haven't seen so much of abstract photography, I've seen some, but it could be landscape, it could be portraiture, it could be candid, it could be street scenes, it could be architectural. A good picture, whether it's a painting or a photograph or a print, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so you also mentioned about Dayanita Singh. So, was it the passionate engagement with the subject that makes a photographer unique? I mean, because I also saw her work when I was researching last 2 days, and it's really
I've never thought about that, Neha, as to what is the relationship between the photographer and their subject. What happens if someone's not passionately involved and they still produce a good picture? I would imagine whenever there is passion, the work will always shine, no matter what you do. If you're passionate about it, it will show up. So, very rarely, unless it's a fluke, does good work continue to happen without passion. So, I would imagine with every great artist, they have to be passionate about what they do. And the moment you see a body of their work, you can tell that.
So, where do you think there is more demand now? Artifacts, antiques, paintings, photography?
I think demand is led by fashion and by trends. Um, I'm not sure it's always because of belief and conviction. So it's fickle. There may be, who knows which way the wind is going to blow. Um, and trends also follow different patterns, who's buying it, where it's being shown, what's sexy, what's fashionable. I don't think I fall for that, or I've followed trends and what has been interesting. I mean, when I had started buying contemporary paintings, people thought I was throwing my money and buying crap. And they would ask me, why have you spent 1,000 rupees buying this when you could buy a shirt or a t-shirt for a few hundred rupees more? So you enjoy the t-shirt, I'll enjoy this. Uh, People would rather buy a pair of shoes than buy a painting, and that's fine. I mean, that's what they enjoy, that's what I enjoy. Um, I started looking at traditional Indian art when most of the people looking at traditional Indian art were switching to contemporary art. So I'm not sure I keep track of where trends and fashions are going. Um, I think people, yeah, what generally happens is if a major retrospective or a seminal exhibition happens on a particular artist, their prices go up. But whether the quality of, very often these are artists who are no more. So there's limited supply in any case. Or take, for example, the recent sale that happened at Pandol's, and some of these miniatures went at crazy prices. So I would imagine that generally people might start looking at miniature paintings more than they looked at before.
Yeah.
But I
But what
can't
is
really.
Abhishek Poddar's personal style? Do you have a lot of antiques, traditional, or mix of both at your home?
I think it's a very Indian. It's an Indian aesthetic, but it's also very eclectic. It's it's mixed together. It's not placed by value or by period or by rarity or anything like that. It's different from, a home is curated the way you live, whereas a museum is curated depending on what you're trying to show. So I'm not sure one is a reflection of the other.
Sure. So, how do you know a work of art is authentic? You have a lot of replicas now, right? So, what should you look for?
One can make mistakes, one does make mistakes, and one has to be careful today. Uh, Technology is becoming better to identify fakes, but technology is also becoming better to make fakes.
Yeah.
So it's a double edged sword. And what was available for people to make a fake work today, that has also gone up as much as telling something that is fake. What makes it more compelling for people to make a fake today is because the prices have gone up. 30, 40 years ago, there was no incentive to do it because the original was not selling for too much money. Um, I would be much more careful looking at a work um, of a modern artist today than I would have been when the artists were around, because you could check with them if it was genuine or not. Yes, you're correct. Every other day, I see possibly more fakes than I see genuine works. When you do something for 40 years, you kind of get a much better sense whether this is right or wrong. I'm not saying that it may always be correct, but something tells you that there is something more than meets the eye here. Very often that has happened, but also I'm not really looking at buying that kind of stuff, but go for provenance, go for early publications where you are sure of where it's coming from. You can burn your fingers badly otherwise.
What are the similarities and differences of photography and paintings? Can a painting portray a more lucid picture than a photograph?
It can, but sometimes a painting can do the same thing. See, a photograph is generally hyper real because that's why we call it photographic. We call art photographic, but we don't call photography as painting like. Uh, Although there is manipulation that you can do on a photograph as well. And I mean, if you were to look at, I'm not sure if I've got your question correctly. Are you trying to show an emotion? Are you, if you were to show somebody really happy and you were to show somebody smiling and, a mother with a child, a Jamni Roy could do it in 4 lines. And a great photograph can also show the same thing. But it's easier to communicate the same thing through a photograph because if the subject is in that mood, it generally gets captured. Even if the artist is in that mood, until Saraswati is in that mood to give him that, it may not happen.
Yeah. Well said. Do you have any blank spot left on your wall waiting for a masterpiece?
No.
What work of art in your collection will you grab first if there was a fire?
You know, somebody had asked me that before.
Okay.
And I said, well, if there was only one work I could save, then I won't go back into the house to save that. He said, no, but there is one thing you have to pick
Yeah.
up from the house.
Yeah.
And when I said, I'll get the pets, and they said, no, there's nobody in the house. The house has got only things. It's got no people, no
Yeah.
staff, no pets, no
Yeah.
nothing. So I said, I'll go and pick up my diary. And they said, why your diary? I said, because it's got all my phone numbers and stuff. This was way back in my to-do list and stuff. I used to keep a handwritten diary, which, of course, in this day and age, everybody had stopped. So he literally gave up in asking me that because I'm fond of the art, but I can't say any of those consume me.
Okay.
I'm not, if all that had to go, how would one make a difference?
Yes, and I know that you even were so generous in, at the Christie's, what you did. So, did you have a heartbreak when you
No,
were sent?
because if I didn't do that, I couldn't have done map.
But they were your personal collection over the years.
Yeah, but you're doing it for something bigger.
So, how does one begin to invest in art? What are the factors that increase its value?
I can tell you from my knowledge, I'm no expert on this. It's the quality of the work, it's the quality of the work, it's the quality of the work. That's the only thing to look at. Most people look at the size of the work, most people look at the name of the artist, most people look at whether it matches with their sofa or their dupatta or whatever the hell else. All that, I would say, might come wherever else in the pecking order, but it's just the quality that you have to look at.
Got it. How can art play a role in social change or community involvement?
I think that calls for a totally separate episode. It is. Art has always played that role and will continue to. This is what defines us as human beings. Why are people called a cultured person and someone called an uncultured person? Culture comes from what? It is not from knowing art, but it is from manners, it's from tehzeeb, it is from how you carry yourself, what is even social etiquette. And why is the word called culture? And what else makes culture but tradition and art and music and poetry and stuff like that? So I think the word itself, the difference between a cultured and an uncultured person. So when you ask, how is society how does art make a difference to society? It's the difference between a cultured person and an uncultured person.
Because I went to your map recently and I saw this exhibit on women, and it had some paintings about rape also. It was painful to see that, actually, in my humble opinion. But yeah.
So the reason we chose subject about the representation of women is, we the idea was to take a topic which was pertinent and important for the nation and to also spotlight it that what are we doing about it. There's no point about reading something in the papers and doing nothing about it. So the show talks about uh, widows, it talks about agency, it talks about gender, it talks about violence, it talks about violence at home, it talks about um, female infanticide, it talks about desire, and a lot of this from a woman's perspective, whose voice
Unheard of.
is so many times just marginalized or diminished in our society. And where is the Indian woman, in spite of her being so present in the arts, in many of these public realms? Why is she so silent? And what, as a society, can we do? So that's the reason some of these things have been talked about in the exhibition.
With the establishment of the map, how do you see private museums reshaping the cultural and artistic landscape of India?
I think quite a bunch of efforts are beginning to take place. You have many people looking at doing something in the public space for the arts. There are initiatives happening. Um, I mean, of course, there is Serendipity, which does its festival, which now Sunil Minjal is opening his place called The Bridge in Delhi. There's Kiran Nadar working on her museum, which would also open in a few years. I think the Godrejas are talking about doing something. There is the Humpy Labs that Sangeeta Jindal has done. There are many such initiatives happening across the country. And I think a lot more is needed because if you look at this is the most populous nation in the world. And how many of us even go to a museum or let art around our lives or be influenced by art? Most of us feel that it's only for either the elite or it's for the artist or it's for the critic. And many of us say, I don't understand it, it goes way above me. Funnily, this is not the case in the Western world. Whether you're a bus conductor or you're a school teacher or you're a tour guide or you're a business magnate, you would go to the Victoria and Albert, you would go to the British Museum, you'd go to the Tate, you'd go to the Met, you would go to the Louvre. But why would we not go to an Indian museum? So I think there is a huge need over here. And India has art from, much before the Western world, uh, barring Greece and Italy. If you look at the art, it's like 500 years old in a large part of Europe. And we have art, I mean, look at what India had. But why have we not bothered about it? So much more needs to happen.
True. And you're one of the few collectors to have made the effort to move from a private collection to building accessible art institutions. What compelled you to do this?
Just because nobody else was doing it. I mean, people talked about doing it, but nobody did it. And in fact, I had heard of at least 10 such initiatives. And every time there would be either a dependency on the government to do something about it, or it was a desire that somebody is going to do it at a certain time. And I said, when you have the wherewithal to do it on your own, why would you just not get up and do it? And the time is not when one is 75 years of age, because of course it's not that you can't do it then, but the energy you have when you're younger is far more than you have at that age. And do it because then you can enjoy it for so many more years yourself. It doesn't mean that by doing it you're going to not enjoy it. So why have, if I'm doing it at 75 and I'm going to only live till 85, I've got 10 years to enjoy it. If I do it at 50, I'll have 35 years to enjoy it.
Hang on. So, what did it take to get so many industrialists to engage with and fund in an institution like MAP Bangalore? What is the secret behind this?
Perseverance,
Really?
not taking no for an answer, and being thick skinned.
Did they all share this common passion?
No, I think some of them must have just supported it to get rid of me. Well, a lot of them, I think, um, of course, all of them believed in the idea at some level, some more than others. Very few of them were passionate about art. Some were, but many of them have never supported the arts before. They also, I think, saw that there was a huge commitment here besides just passion, and there was a lot of skin in the game. It wasn't that I was just asking them, it was by leading from the front, by what we raised from others. I I mean, we put in 50% on our own first before we asked anyone to support. When it came to building the corpus, the family gifted the collection to match the corpus. So they knew that there was serious commitment and passion, both.
What is the common vision of MAP, and do all board members share it? Do you have disagreements?
Seldom.
Yeah.
I think the common passion is to make art accessible, to make it fun and engaging, and to keep doing something which is going to be meaningful and engaging for the audience. And when I say, there isn't a goal that we have which we have set, because if the world changes, like a perfect example was what we had set out to make MAP changed completely during COVID. And if we didn't change with that, there's no point in making something which is not going to be relevant today.
Yeah.
Similarly, with Map Academy, it was about making art accessible to people who can't come to the museum because it's going to be online and the world moved online.
Yeah.
So, how to do it there? So, I think the best we can do is adapt to what is the changing needs. And if you are looking at doing it for yourself, then it doesn't matter what you're doing, because if it means to you, it means to you. But if you're looking at making it relevant to the community, then what is going to be relevant to the community has to be shaped by what life is like today.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be irrelevant.
Move with time, yeah. So MAP has made a big effort in outreach through innovative programming, especially young ones, young people. It's a gap in Indian art that has been felt for long. What can be done by public institutions that have huge and essential collections to get more Indians to engage with their collection?
So I can't take any credit for the programming at MAP. We just have this fantastic team.
Okay.
And the head of programming who does this. And, when I know that I have nothing to add to something, I just stay away, because if someone's doing a better job than you can do, then why meddle into that?
Yeah.
So this is really a question for Shilpa and her team.
Okay. Amazing. But what do you think public institutions can do to make it more engaging?
I think it is just about getting off your high horse that I know better. And what have we done to make art engaging? I mean, you've been to MAP.
Yeah.
What did you find different there compared to other museums? And why is it engaging? If you answer that question, it will be easier rather than me answering it. And what we've tried to do is, we might have curators and experts, but we are going to make you curate your own experience and journey at MAP. You want to, the amount of stuff which is in your control, besides the exhibitions which are not so much your control, because that's a pre-curated show that you would see. Maybe you would change the order, you would not spend so much time in front of something or engage more or less with something, depending on your likes, dislikes, time, circumstances. But everything else in the museum, which exhibition you want to see in the Saskan gallery, how much time you want to spend on it, which article you want to read in the encyclopedia, which game you want to play, which greeting you want to send, which kind of artist or genre you want to search, what you want to look at. Even if you go down to the Digital Experience Center and you curate your own kaleidoscope journey, you draw something and look for it in the collection, you can literally do it your way.
Yeah.
Even in the visual storage, which exhibition do you want to see, you pull that out, you sit for as long as you like. And if you went back tomorrow, you can have a completely different experience and yet spend 3 hours there. So if we leave decision making into other people's hands and give them the tools to be able to do so in an interesting, engaging manner, is what we've done.
I think I went there in the space, you can just sit there and just, look at it. And it's beautiful space, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah. What role do you think technology plays in democratizing access to art, especially the younger generation?
I think this it's you can't say enough that it is technology that makes this happen because uh, we saw during COVID, it was only technology that allowed us to access anything. And art played a huge role there because that's what kept us sane through that entire period. Whether it was, and by art, I'm not just talking about the visual arts, but even the performing arts and everything. So it allows you to get into details. It allows you to, and now with AI, you can do so much with it. Uh, at the end of the day, it is what an artist does is takes an idea and presents it to you through the medium of his mind, and then whatever form he's given it, whether it's using his hands to sculpt or to paint or to take a picture or to write a piece of poetry, technology does the same. But that is in creating new art. But in dissecting the art, in sifting through it, in organizing it, in sorting it, in helping you assimilate it, it's much more than what a human being or all the people in the world put together can do.
So, what is the plan with Map Academy?
The plan is what the it started off with an encyclopedia of Indian art, which I think is ongoing because how do you compress thousands of years of Indian art into a few years of work? So it'll never be completely done. It'll always be a work in progress, but the amount of work left over would continue to reduce. We then started courses on Indian art on that, and we've done three so far. Really? One on textiles, one on modern and contemporary art, one on craft. They're all free and they're online. We are looking at doing a bunch of other ones, and these are the short courses. Then we are looking at the long courses. What's next on in the pipeline is a timeline on Indian art, which would be quite exciting that we should unveil in the coming year. So that's the agenda for that. And like I said, this is the agenda that we have right now. You ask me the agenda next year, it might be something else.
So, what does it take to run a museum? What are the different issues you face? And are there any strategy to make visitors feel more welcome in your museum?
So, I mean, running a museum is a complex affair, but if you have a great team and a lovely, understanding set of heads of department, your life becomes a lot easier. I don't run the museum. I have an amazing director, Harish Vasudevan, and Arnika, who's our chief curator, and Shilpa, who I already mentioned. These are the three real pillars and rocks behind MAP. And the success of what they do, I may be the face of it, but I don't deserve the credit for it. Uh, it's a large team we have. There are over 120 people in the team between MAP Academy and the museum and the technology behind it. And multitude of departments doing different things and working together in tandem.
So, do you find the role of a museum curator broader than what it used to be?
I don't know what to compare it with, but it's a complex role because every department has to work collaboratively because you need the collections department to be doing that, you need your production department, you need the publication department, you need even your inclusion because what is your text going there and how your visitor engagement cell, your education department because how else are you going to make it engaging, your public programming department. So it's complex, but I would imagine there's a lot more collaboration needed right now than there used to be before. But I only have a 2 year experience of running a museum.
India now has more than 300 billionaires. What's the direction in which you see philanthropy moving in the country?
So I think the good thing is that a lot more money would flow towards philanthropy because more money is being made. And I think COVID had a big shift where people realized that life is transient and you need to help each other. And there's nothing as satisfying as helping a fellow human being. I still feel it is education, healthcare, poverty elevation, which is what gets bulk of the money. Religion, of course, gets a lot. But there are different people who are looking at passion projects which are very specific. The arts continue to get amongst the lowest spends out of philanthropy. It's currently at less than 0.75% of 1%, which I think in a civilized and in a cultured society should be about 3%.
Yeah.
So we are hoping it gets there, but it would take time because people have never seen the importance of things like this. But I think they're beginning to see that now.
And how do you think? How did you think of showcasing the Kanchana Chitra Ramayana map? What is the story behind it?
So this was a group of, it was commissioned by the Maharaja of Banaras in the late 1700s. And it had never really been seen publicly. This remained in his collection or in the royal family's collection for hundreds of years. And then it recently got dispersed. We were fortunate to get a bunch of these as gifts for the museum by different patrons. And it was Kavita Singh, this great curator,
Yeah.
late Kavita Singh, who, when she saw this, she was very tempted to do a show of this. We were looking at actually doing another exhibition, and there were three ideas, and this was one of the ideas, but she said, let's work on this first. And it was really her pushing all the other people who've contributed articles to this that made this happen. And it was the first time this book was ever, it wasn't in its totality because we showed only 80 pages out of 500 plus. But what we did is that we digitized the book,
Okay.
which is dispersed, and we had only 80, 90 pages in color, which is from the works that we had
Yeah.
access to. And by the time we finished the exhibition, we have over 300 pages in. So this is what technology can also do.
Yeah. Last question. What advice would you give to the younger entrepreneurs and art collectors who want to make a difference in their communities?
How should it make a difference whether they collect art or they don't collect art? I think everybody should make a difference to their communities because their communities shape them and make a difference. We've all, we look back at those who made a difference to our lives or shaped our communities in a positive manner. And unless we do the same going forward, how else are we going to be remembered? Whether you collect art or not is incidental.
Yeah.
So I think
No,
if
but
you can pay it forward in whatever way,
yeah.
uh, you know, we take life too seriously and we think we are going to be here permanently. Nobody has been and nobody will be. So we all know this, but we don't live like that. If we just start living a little lightly, a little more gently, everything will become a lot better.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abhishek.
Thank you, Neha.
Pleasure.